Hi, Werner. It's
Hey, Lara.
Hi. So nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm Lara. I'm a startup founder. And fun fact, my very first company was eventually indirectly bought out by Amazon. At the time, I never had the chance to meet anyone from Amazon. So in a way, it means that we're meant to be today. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to have a chat with you. And as would any founder of a startup do, I would love to get and to grab some tips from the man that some call the tech behind Jeff Bezos. So Werner, you're the CTO of Amazon and you have been in a company within, I think, like almost 16 years, something like this.
I'm about to have my anniversary, so it's almost 17 now.
Almost 17 years, like a long time. And so maybe can you give us a little bit of information about your role and how do you keep it the day one mentality, the famous day one mentality?
Oh. Well, first of all, I think I think the role of a CTO in general is not very well defined. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a famous quote of Gates and his first CTO. He said, "So with the CTO, I said, so what's my role going to be?" He says, "Well, we'll figure it out when we see it." And so if you see over time, there's CTOs that are infrastructure managers, basically reporting up to the CIO, just keeping data centers alive. And then there are the ones that I would call more technology vision and operations manager. And I think that's mostly the role of a CTO in a startup, where you're basically doubling up on what I would call the role of a CTO, which is looking at technology and thinking about the role of technology in the company, and that of a VP of engineering. Basically, I think these are two very different roles. And often in a startup, you combine the roles. But it's a VP of engineering gets out of bed in the morning thinking about, do I have the absolute best team? Are they absolutely well positioned? Are they protected? Are they shielded from other things? And the CTO thinks about tech. But in startups, often these two roles are combined, and you're not only a technology thinker, but you're also a people manager. And then I think there's the role, and that's how I got hired at Amazon as being sort of the big thinker. So Amazon already knew how to scale in 2004, but from a really practical perspective. And so hiring an academic as me, who to be honest, this was my real first job. So to bring sort of academic rigor to big projects like how to think about metrics, how to measure things, how to have a culture of measurement. And then we did a year on fault tolerance, how to remove all single points of failures. And we did a year on efficiency and all these kind of things. So it's having really big projects. Without that, I had many people reporting to me. There was a few skunk works going on. But in general, that was it. Then we started AWS. And then your role as CTO changes. Because you become what I would call an external facing technologist. Because your role suddenly becomes understanding how your customers are using your technology. In retail, it was easy. People go to the website, people buy stuff. But in AWS, it's a very different story. First of all, we were doing things that nobody else had done before. So understanding how your customers are using your technology is crucial. And then trying to figure out what are the broader patterns out there that we should be solving or pain points that people are still having, and then take that insight and start thinking about new products or new services. And so that's much more my role now than sort of the big thinker. Although there was a time when nobody knew about cloud computing, so I spent a lot of time on sort of being the prophet for the movement, if you would call it like that. But now there's a lot of work in sort of interacting with customers.
And as a startup founder, I'm really interested about the insight that you could maybe share with the attendees today. And I guess as the CTO of Amazon, you probably know what like we should all startups be thinking about today? What should be in your mind?
Let me take a little bit of a controversial word. After all, I'm a CTO, so I'm going to talk about the tech stuff of your startup. Yeah. First and foremost, these days there are 3 things you should think about that have nothing to do with your. Looks like they have nothing to do with your product. Yeah. Number 1, you should think about is security. Yeah. Without protecting your customers and your business, you have no business. Yeah, and you may be a young business and think about, who would want my data, or who won't want to have access to my customers. That's crazy, because it's your data plus someone else's data. And I don't think there is a week that goes by where there is not an embarrassing report in the news about another 500 million names or information that gets stolen. And it's a continuous threat. So you should be thinking about security from day one. If you've built your, let's say, the brilliant idea that you have and have to add security at the end, it's not going to work. It's something that you have to think about from day one. Every engineer needs to be a security engineer, or needs to think as a security engineer. Secondly, probably the software you're going to run, hopefully, for a much longer time than that you were developing it. Hopefully, yeah. Which means that every minute you spend upfront thinking about how to operate your software, how to manage your software, will benefit you for years to come. Yeah, and so that is an investment that doesn't look like it goes into the business logic or into the brilliant idea that you have. But, a year from now, when you have to operate your software still and you didn't invest in it, it's going to be a nightmare. And you're going to be refactoring and throwing things back and stuff like that. Another point, third point. These days, I think you should think about sustainability. Yeah, you should think about, and I don't mean sort of, we'll take care on the cloud side of our side of sustainability, building more efficient data center, having higher densities, all these kind of things. You as a company should start thinking about, maybe I don't need to give my results to my customers so terribly fast. Yeah, if I serve this web page in 1.7 instead of 1.2 seconds at the 99th percentile, I'm probably going to be using less resources. Yeah? Does every page need to have such high density graphics and video? It's what we expect these days. We expect real-time, fast, high quality, all these kind of things, even from a competitive point of view. But maybe there's 1 or 2 videos that you can leave off. Yeah, and so thinking about, and I think this is a beginning culture, thinking about sort of reducing your quality a little bit in exchange for being more sustainable.
I will never explain.
And that's something you as engineers can do, or you as a company can do. Right. Yeah, because especially when you think about sort of page latencies and things like that, there is a diminishing return on putting more resources against it. And I know, it's conversion goes much better if you have lower page latencies and things like that. Well, maybe we can give up some of that in exchange for being more sustainable. Yeah, so those are the 3 kind of advices I would have now for if I would be talking to a startup CTO. That would be sort of like start thinking about these things up front instead of that they are supposed to be an afterthought. I'm pretty sure that for every company in a few years from now, we'll all be hammered about sort of asking about sort of what's our carbon footprint? How can we measure it? What have we done to reduce it? All these kind of things, and rightfully so, because that's what we should be focused on. And so we should start thinking as engineers about what kind of controls do we have to actually reduce that footprint while still serving our customers.
Now, thank you so much, because I would never imagine that you will give us such an advice, because like knowing Amazon and what you're doing for customers is like crazy. And I would never say that. Maybe like go a step.
No, because we all want to go faster.
No,
we all want to go faster.
If
you look at if you look at Twitter these days, I think something like 80% of the messages include some form of imagery or video.
Okay. No, yeah.
These are all high intensity distributions. They all cost resources both on the client side as well on the server side. We should start thinking differently about that. And I haven't really worked it out yet, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah, there will be advice coming from us in this direction about what we can do as architects.
Perfect. Last question, and I have like 1 or 2 minutes just to ask it for you. So you travel around the world to meet customers, and do you think you can tell us a little bit more about what are the interesting technologies and use cases you have seen in your travels? Maybe 1 or 2, because I guess you have a lot on mind.
So many. So yeah, I was very fortunate, of course, to travel around the world for years. And so one of the things that I noticed is that, let's say, outside of the normal Western powerhouses, Western Europe and the US, there are a lot of companies focusing on really hard problems. And they're building what I would call a sustainable company. But what I mean by that is they're not looking for become a quick unicorn and cash out. Yeah, we're mostly probably focused on customer acquisition and advertisement and things like that. But more thinking about how do you grow your company in a way that they can run it for the coming 30 years. Yeah, and so charging your customer for a product is already something that it seems quite unique in a digital age. But in a normal physical environment, we're used to paying for everything. Yeah, and so why not in a digital world? But okay, so I'm very fortunate, and there are companies that are doing really hard things. And so whether that is thinking about sort of that we don't have enough protein in the world, so how do you grow more protein? So in Bergen in Norway, massive fish pans with 200,000 salmons in is using machine learning and imagery to track them. Or in Berlin, for example, Germany took in 2 million refugees. Now, it turns out that most of these refugees are not economic refugees. They're really well-educated people that came out from countries that are under siege. And so training them to become IT professionals in a year gives them immediately a job. There's 80,000 open positions in Germany for IT professionals, and not all of those require a computer science degree.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, and I think the first episode we did is still one of the most impressive ones. So this is about a TV series that we do called Now Go Build, to highlight these companies. It's a company called Harvard Token in Jakarta. So it turns out that almost all of the smallholder farmers in Indonesia have no identity. They cannot get a loan. Yeah, and they have no information about their land or whatever. So they have to go to a loan shark and pay 60% on or to loan money to buy seeds to do the next harvest. And so by giving these farmers an identity and measure their land and their yield, these guys can suddenly, or these farmers can suddenly get loans from official banks at minimal percentages, and they all pay them back because these are all microloans. Yeah, and so suddenly creating a database almost, or a data sense around people with no identity, suddenly they get an identity. And suddenly all the government agencies can get insight into what's actually happening on the country. And so there's tons of other that we've done. We've done things around conservation in South Africa, on healthcare in Brazil, getting older in Japan.
For sure.
Yeah, and so all of these are companies, young businesses that are solving really hard problems.
Thank you so much for sharing this, Werner. Thank you so much for taking your time to give us like tips and strong advice. Thank you. Hopefully, we will see you in Paris next year for the Happy Day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Lara. Bye-bye.